Solving one- and two-step equations. The first thing we have to know in order to solve one- and two-step equations is what is the difference between an equation and an expression. Expressions are mathematical phrases made up of numbers and variables connected by operators such as addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. For example, 3x plus 2 is an expression. Equations are statements formed by two expressions related by an equal sign. For example, 3x plus 3, 2x minus 1 are the expressions, and in between, we have an equal sign. Solving one-step equations. We need to know that to solve an equation means to find the value of the variable that makes the equation true. So if I look at the example x plus 2 equals 5, I can think about that question in my head and I can think, what number added to 2 equals 5? Well, obviously that's 3. And I can do those questions hopefully in my head. But when I get to this question down here, negative 4x plus 5 is negative 7, that's a lot of trial and error to do in your head. So we're going to look at strategies with one-step equations where we know the answer and see if we can figure out a way to help us move forward to two-step equations. Equations are always balanced, and we can think about them as using a balance scale, where you've got a left side of the scale and a right side of the scale, and in order for the scale to stay balanced, you have to have the same weight on either side. We're going to create balance scales, and we're going to use a few symbols to help us out with that. We're going to use a green rectangle to represent a positive x, a white rectangle to represent a negative x, a red square to represent positive 1, and a white square to represent negative 1. Now, if we look at the equation we had a few minutes ago, we had x plus 2 is 5. So I need to grab 2x tile, or 1x tile, and I need to put 2 reds for the 1s, and I need 5 reds here for the 5 tiles. No problem. Now, I need to get these 2 red guys to go away. I don't like them. They have to move. If I just take them off the scale, though, my scale will be unbalanced. So in order to take them off my scale, to get rid of a positive 1, I need a negative 1. And to get rid of the other positive 1, I need another negative 1. Now together, these create 0. But I took 2 off the left side of my scale, so I have to take 2 off the right side of my scale. So now I'm left with x on the left and 3 1s on the right. So what did I do? I took 2 away on the left side to get the x by itself, and I took 2 away on the right side. If you were just to look at this, how would you know that you subtract 2 from both sides of the equation? Take a minute and think about that. Pause the video before you move on to the next one. Hopefully you realize that to isolate the variable, you determine the opposite of the constant term. This number here, 2, is called a constant term. The opposite of positive 2 is negative 2. So I'm going to figure out that the opposite of 2 is negative 2 first, and I'm going to add negative 2 to both sides of the equation and then simplify. Can I do something similar when I have a multiplication? Sorry, guys. So let's put my 4x's here right now. 4x's. I only want to have 1x in the end, and I've got these 8 tiles here. Something's funny. Oh, let's move them on. I'm going to put one, I'm going to line them up with the tiles on the left with the x's. And I'm giving one of each of my 8 tiles to each x. And I'm going to give one of them to each x again. And if I want to get x all by itself, I want to make each x have the same value. So if I have 4x's, if I look, I've got 8 negative 1s, and I can give each x 2 of them. So in essence, what did I do? Pause the video, try and do this a few more times with a few different examples and see if you can figure out what exactly you're doing. Now, if I look at that, I split it into 4 groups. So really what I did was I divided both sides by 4, to end up with x equals -2. Sorry, I'm having trouble moving things here right now. So we divided both sides of our equation by 4. Solving two-step equations, can we do something similar? Absolutely. So we're going to do 4x plus 5 is -7. We got 4x's, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I want 5 ones. Let's move this up a little bit. Four x plus 5. And it equals -7. Oops. Well, when I look at this, I want to get my x's by themselves. That means I have to get rid of these 5 positive 1s. So how do I get rid of positive 5? To make 0, I have to have a -1 for each one. So I'm going to put a -1 here. So I'm adding 1 negative, 2 negatives, 3 negatives, oops, 4 negatives, 5 negatives. If I add 5 negatives to the left, I have to add 5 negatives to the right. So I put 5 negatives on the left and 5 negatives on the right. And then if I look, I've got some 0 models happening here. That's a 0 model. My 0 model things. I thought I was being smart and making shapes ahead of time. It's not working so well, so let's just see. 1 0 model, 2, 3, 4. Those are all gone. So I'm left with 4x's on the left. And I have -12 on the right. Now, I actually know what to do with this because we just did one-step equations. So when I have 4x, 4 times the number equaling a constant, I know that I can divide by 4 and get the answer. So 4x equals -12 means I'm going to divide everything. I don't like the way that worked. Sorry. I'm going to go back a slide here. Sorry, I apologize. I've got 4x equals 12, and I know that that now becomes 4x equals -12, and I can divide everything through by 4. I could have taken the time and stacked my x's on top of each other and put 4 x's neatly on top of each other and given each one 3 tiles, but we're not going to do that, okay? Because we don't know how, we don't need this. We already know what to do. So what did we do first? The first thing we did was get rid of that +5 by adding -5. And then we simplified both sides. And then we split the constant term and the variable into the number of groups by dividing. So let's recap that again. We had 4x plus 5 equals -7. And the first thing we did was subtract 5 from both sides so that I created a 0 model. So now I'm left with 4x equals -12. And how do I get rid of the -12? I have to divide both sides by 4. And now I have x equals -3.